in the next hour, Jamie Manning from Infinity and Nico Mann from Peloton will walk us through the finance transformation journey at Infinity and how they leveraged both planning and OBIEE in that journey. Without further ado, let's jump in here. We'll go through the agenda. I'll introduce Jamie and Nico here shortly, after which Jamie will walk us through a background on Infinity and the FP&A challenges that they were facing. Both Jamie and Nico will then cover the solution, the keys to success, as well as next steps in Infinity's transformation journey. With that, I want to introduce you to Jamie. Jamie is currently the manager of financial planning and analysis for Infinity. He started there in 2007 and has progressed through various increasingly senior FP&A roles during his time at the company. He's currently transitioning into a new role at Infinity, where he'll be part of the IT organization and serve as a critical liaison between business, finance, accounting, and IT. Jamie received his Bachelor of Science from Wayne State University and received his MBA from the Sawyer School of Management at Suffolk University. Jamie, welcome to the webinar. Again, really appreciate your participation.
Thank you, Ray.
Nico Mann is a manager in the business analytics practice here at Peloton. Nico is a BI architect with experience in OBIEE, BI applications, and mobile BI, and has implemented BI solutions for a variety of clients in industries such as retail, life sciences, insurance, and A&D. Nico is an active speaker on the topics of BI, mobile BI, and visualization, and has spoken at multiple conferences, including Oracle Open World and Kscope. Nico, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Ray.
With that, Jamie, please walk us through Infinity and some of the challenges that you folks were looking at.
Yeah, sure. To give a little bit of background on Infinity, as you saw on the front slide, we're about 200 employees right now, and we are a biotech company focused on treating oncology-based diseases. And we're currently in phase 2 and phase 3 with our lead program and looking to move into the commercial zone. So there's a lot of challenges ahead of us to make sure that we set our finances up to be a commercial organization. Okay. As I was just mentioning, we've just partnered with AbbVie to develop our lead candidate, which is duvelisib. And so as we work towards our commercial organization, it's really important that we develop reporting structures and accountability for our partnership so that we have the right insight into our finances. A little bit about our pipeline. As you see, our lead candidate is in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, but we also have multiple other candidates that are in the preclinical stage in animals as well as the research stage. So as we progress through each of these phases, there are lots of different reporting needs and different types of accountability across the board. This is kind of a neat slide. Infinity just had a company survey that said, what are the 5 words as an employee that you would describe our company? The larger words are the ones that repeated the most across the organization. So you see things like innovative, passionate, and responsible. And as we move into this reporting journey with Peloton, we'd like to look back at that and say, hey, we are truly doing innovative things with this reporting software. We are passionate, and we're trying to make not only our company responsible for our finances within our partnership, but also to put responsibility out there across the organization at the functional or departmental level.
So now that you guys have a pretty good understanding of Infinity's background, let's take a look at what their performance management landscape looked like in early 2012, specifically from a reporting, planning, and data management perspective. So starting with reporting, there was a heavy emphasis on doing a lot of manual calculations and pivot tables within Excel and pulling a lot of that information out of transactional systems. So if you think of things like Discover, FSGs, so a lot of dependence on that, and Jamie's going to talk to some of the details associated with that.
Yeah, so as our company evolved, our reporting needs have evolved with it. And so the Oracle FSGs were the canned reports. It's an acronym for Financial Statement Generator. And it didn't provide Infinity with the flexibility that we needed to report across the organization. So in the short term, we put an Oracle add-on called Discover. And Discover allowed us to really get a data dump, but it didn't provide any type of canned reporting. So that allowed us to create pivot tables, but as we're creating pivot tables for departments, functions, companies, partnerships, if there was a change in a journal entry, we had to rerun that Oracle Discover report, and we had to go through and actually redo the pivot tables across the board. So it was super heavy manual labor to do that, and we weren't able to turn the reports around quickly in order for the functions and departments to make informed decisions.
And just kind of staying on the track of manual processes, similar to the reporting, planning was another pain point for them. So there was a lot of emphasis on putting people's plan within Excel and then compiling all of those spreadsheets into a single one so that they could then actually upload it to the GL through a very rigorous process.
Yeah, so we were using the GL not only for our actuals, but we were uploading through Oracle ADI our forecast into the GL as well. So very limited on the amount of reporting that we could do for forecast trends as well as forecast to actuals. And as Nico mentioned, the process of uploading each of those account strings into Oracle GL was very labor intensive. You know, especially when you get to places like allocations, there was a heavy amount of work to change formulas for each allocation. And so we were spending 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks out of the month just manipulating the data just to put it into Oracle as a repository and still not getting the reporting that we needed.
And just staying on the final track here, so focusing on data management. So as you heard, they're doing a lot of their work in Excel, pulling information out of eBusiness, their transactional system. There wasn't a lot of focus on hierarchy management, data management, really no central data warehouse to store all of that relevant information. So that was definitely one of their pain points as well.
Yeah, and as we talked about using Discover as a data dump, we would take a pivot table to the Discover table, but there was information from the Discover reports that we didn't have stored anywhere. For example, departments that rolled up to different functions. We didn't have that hierarchy stored anywhere in the system, so therefore we couldn't report off of it. So what we ended up doing was VLOOKUPs and tying that to a key table that we had created offline. The same thing with our projects and our account string. We wanted those projects to roll up to programs. That data didn't have a consistent place for that to live. And within our programs, we wanted to create indications. And all of that was manual sorting and manual VLOOKUPs. So what we're going to talk about has been a huge improvement in terms of time and process for us.
So now that you guys have heard some of the pain points associated with planning, reporting, and data management, let's look at what some of that actually meant in terms of looking to the future. So we talked about a lot of these manual processes. One of the biggest things here is let's set up an architecture that can accommodate reporting, planning, as well as data management in a central location. So getting away from these manual processes, moving into automated reporting, automated planning, and really focusing on this idea of having a single version of the truth in a central location. That way people aren't compiling their own information in their own offline spreadsheets in separate locations.
Yeah, and to speak to that, depending on who ran the report, they may have created their own key for how projects rolled up to indications or departments rolled up to functions. So across even accounting or finance, we didn't have that single source of truth. So by creating these hierarchies, we were able to address that and have that single source.
So as you've heard, Infinity actually recognized that they needed to move into a more automated fashion, make things more central to the organization. And Jamie and the FP&A team, as well as IT, were really the ones who are leading this path and this drive forward to really push the organization to move into these new technologies. And now that you guys have heard a bit about their background, let's look at the solution that's been implemented over the last couple of years. So before we get into the specifics of the processes, the technology, we want to talk about some of the goals and objectives that Infinity was looking to achieve over the last couple of years. So again, this focus of putting in an enterprise planning solution, putting in a central location for reporting, and then also a data warehouse to maintain the information, not only from a historical perspective, but going forward to add in additional data sources. But the question here is, how did they get to that? How did they come up with these goals, these objectives, and really, how did they understand what they were looking to accomplish? And originally, Infinity was looking to just have some reporting implemented, make it more automated, but then they took a step back and decided to go with Peloton's mobilization framework. And really the focus here is envisioning, vision for the future, not only short term, but also in the long term. So where do you see yourself going, and how are these technologies and processes going to enable you to grow in the future? So that was really the focus of the beginning of the program, going through this mobilization and then coming out with a roadmap at the end in order to actually prioritize some of those technologies and processes that were implemented.
And a key to the philosophy behind this discovery exploration and going into the roadmap, we had a lot of very short-term, high-impact, high-value projects that we needed to address. But we didn't want to take our eye off the prize and say, where do we want to be as an organization in the next 5 years? So even though we're in the development of a drug, we knew that in the future we would be a commercial organization with P&Ls across different types of products. So as we built this architecture, we were always saying to ourselves, let's make sure that we build this in a way so as we don't build ourselves into the corner, or let's set up the architecture so that we may not be leveraging it at this particular moment, but in the future, as we go along this roadmap, we may start to leverage that architecture that we put into place.
And based on what Jamie just said, this is actually the roadmap that came out of that mobilization. So just calling your attention to some of the items here, you can see there's a focus on FP&A reporting, on an enterprise planning solution, commentary capture for variance reporting, FTE reporting, and then just some of the things for the future, looking at things like drill through and more of master data management. So keeping those things in mind in the long term while also implementing these shorter term projects in a quick turnaround manner, and then but still having the architecture to support that in the future. And our short-term needs when we first started working with Peloton were that we needed more flexible reports than our current FSGs, and we needed reports that allowed us to be ad hoc reporting very quickly, that instead of going through Discover and pivot tables. So when you look at our phase one, we were it's very brief in terms of FP&A reports, accounting reports, because we knew that we were going to address more reports in the future. But we said, you know, quickness is most important to us right now. What can we get done in the next 2 to 3 months so that we have some small wins that we could then socialize with the organization? So phase one, we spent a lot of time on what are our high priority reports that we want to create. Then we actually moved into our phase two first. So phase two was really addressing how do we get the forecast out of the GL, leverage Hyperion Planning, how do we look at our allocation, which was previously done in Oracle, and say, how do we really want to leverage our allocations? A lot of these were sort of legacy allocations and weren't providing a ton of value to the organization. So we really took a step back and said, what is the most important allocations and how do we want to allocate so that in the future, when we're a commercial organization, it's allocating in the right way. Then we went back to our phase 1.1 and phase 2, and we started to look at, we've really addressed the FP&A reporting in phase 1. We now have forecasts out of Oracle in phase 2. Now let's go back to the reporting and start to give accounting some of the reports that they need. For example, just the GL entry report or a purchase order report,
an invoice on hold report. And we're starting to migrate all of the reports that were previously held in Oracle FSGs to this new platform, so that we're not maintaining two platforms at once. Then as we go into our phase 3, 1.3 and 1.4, we start to look at how can we leverage other data that we have in the organization, like our FTEs. Our FTEs aren't part of our Oracle reporting system. It's a home-built system. So as we went into those later phases, we had our data warehouse, and we said, you know what? We want to get a forecast of our spend through 2015. We want to compare that to the actuals as that happened. Then we want to pull in this other data source, which is our FTEs, and find out where people are spending their time so we can get a full picture of our expenses, internal and external expenses. Then as you look at our future phases, that's where we're starting to look at the clinical development plans. Do we want to leverage other types of software like ClearTrial? Headcount planning. Do we want to use a solution like workforce planning and integrate all of those solutions into our data warehouse?
And as Jamie mentioned, really the core to this was the foundational architecture. So quickly we'll walk you through at a high level what the architecture is in place, and then we'll really get into the details around the solution. So the source information is primarily coming out of EBS, and then that information is all getting sourced into the data integration layer, which is an Oracle data warehouse. And then within the analytic layer, so really focusing on the applications that are being used, there are things like Essbase Studio, Hyperion Planning, OBIEE, all for different purposes. So you think of planning being used for enterprise planning and budgeting. And then you have Essbase Studio actually in place for the future for when they want to implement drill through to transactional details from their higher level summary reports. So thinking ahead, putting this architecture in place so that it can actually support those needs in the future when they do come up. Then from a presentation perspective, from more of a dashboard, guided navigation, automated report delivery, we have OBIEE, and then as Jamie mentioned, using SmartView for more ad hoc reporting when needs come up on a daily basis. So now let's get into the details of the solution. So within the data warehouse itself, not only were we sourcing in information from EBS, but there was also this focus on hierarchy management. So there was a need for Infinity to create reporting rollups that couldn't necessarily be created within EBS because of the difficulty associated with that. And we also wanted to have that in a central location so it could be used across multiple applications, OBIEE, Essbase, and planning.
So yeah, to jump into that and sort of this data integration layer that Nico touched on, this actually became extremely valuable to us. So when we talk about departments that roll up into functions and functions that roll up into SG&A and R&D, previously we had to sort by the department and either add up the departments that we considered in a function, or we had to do a VLOOKUP based on a key that we created to add in the additional hierarchy, which was function. But now, by using OBIEE and using SmartView, we're able to just source at the functional level, and the subtotals are already on the reports.
Exactly, really that focus on automation. And the same thing goes for planning as well. So getting all that information out of Excel and putting it into planning so that they could run their allocations through an automated process along with the calculations. And then from a reporting perspective, getting the information into OBIEE, an enterprise reporting application, so that everyone is accessing it from a single location and not having all their reports in their own offline spreadsheets. And we'll get into more of the details behind each of these components. But one of the things I want to touch on as well is really the focus on Peloton's breakaway methodology throughout this process, which really was helpful to implementing the solution that Infinity was looking for. So you think of a traditional waterfall methodology, you get some requirements, the developers go off for a long period of time and then come back with a solution hoping that the end users like it, which a lot of the time doesn't really work out. So we use the breakaway methodology, which really focuses on a more iterative approach where the end users are actually involved from the beginning of the process. So they see the solution as it evolves, as it's implemented and developed. That way, at the end, they're not only willing to use it, they want to use it and are excited about using it.
This is an important factor in how we designed each of these reports. Because as we're going through the reporting requirements with Peloton, without a doubt, there's things that we didn't anticipate or couldn't have anticipated. For example, our collaboration and what that type of partnership reporting would look like. So as Peloton's going through gathering the requirements, they then will allow you to have a first pass at what the reports will look like. So at least at a high level, you know they're going down the right pathway to design those types of reports. And then throughout the process, as they make iterations, they're constantly bringing you back in. So by the time that you see the final report in development, you've actually seen it built along the way.
And to highlight what Jamie's talking about, we actually do that through what are called business adoption models, or BAM sessions. And really, this is bringing in the key end users throughout the process so they can really get hands-on, look and feel, and if they like the reports or the planning solutions that are being implemented, so that they're very comfortable with it by the end of the project.
And from a finance perspective, this is where we really started to reach out to the functional departments and say, what information do you need, and how can we show that information? This wasn't developed in a silo with finance and accounting or just finance and Peloton. We really took the time to reach out to all key stakeholders at different levels. And the stakeholders at each level were very different. For example, at the consolidated P&L, it might have been a more executive group of stakeholders. Then as you move down, you have your functional stakeholders, and then down all the way down to your department stakeholders. Then within that, you have your vertical stakeholders, which are your program leaders, which have a cut of each of the functions. So by reaching out to these stakeholders early in the process, we were able to understand what their needs were and start to develop those reports based off that.
And just transitioning into what this report and dashboard taxonomy looks like, Jamie talked a lot about what the guided navigation approach was from each functional perspective. So if you start at a high level looking at ELT, they're only concerned in more of a summary level perspective, but then someone from a department's perspective wants to see the more detailed information associated with their costs. So really giving them that end user experience where they see the information that they're most interested in and don't have to filter through a lot of useless information.
Yeah, I like to look at this view as a pyramid of information, so that the blue executive summary is at the peak of the pyramid. And so if we were to go to the executive leadership team and want to show them one piece of paper of where the company is at, and they could understand at a very high level for a particular month, quarter, or year, we would be able to give them that summary P&L. It has a lot of white, but gives the highest level of information across our G&A and R&D. And then they have a little bit more of view into the next levels of reports. As you go down the pyramid, you start to get into your functional reporting. And at each of these reporting levels, that is where the accountability and responsibility of managing a budget and actuals come into play. So you have your clinical, pre-clin development, market research. These are all of our different functions. And each of them have their own report, which has their own sort of pyramid of information. Because if you look at a clinical functional view, think of it as a subset of the highest level of information for that particular function. Beneath that, you have the detail. So clinical could get their two reports and drill all the way down to the detail and understand where their variances are, or be able to do different types of scenario analysis. If you look at the yellow departmental on the side there, think of that as underneath the functional. That's a function is a roll-up of our departments. So each department will also get their own subset of reports that allows them to drill down from the highest level of information to the lowest level of information.
And I know we've been talking about these tools in reference to Infinity, but I wanted to give you guys a bit of a background of both Oracle Business Intelligence as well as Hyperion Planning, just for those who are not familiar with it, just so they can get a little more comfortable. So mostly you think of OBI being used for interactive dashboards and reports, and this focus on guided navigation and getting to the information that you need. But OBI also has the ability to do ad hoc reporting. So for someone who's a power user, they could go into OBI and create a report of their own from all of the data sources that are being referenced in OBI. And then there's also the focus on automated report delivery. So somebody who doesn't necessarily make it into the application that often can have their report delivered to their email first thing in the morning, so they don't have to go track down the people to create that report for them. And then one of the things that gets overlooked a lot of the times is this concept of actionable intelligence. So really being proactive about information that you see in the data on your dashboards and reports. And OBI has a lot of different capabilities to be actionable, whether it's sending out an email to a particular user or actually sending a message to somebody on a mobile device. It has a lot of different capabilities that you can get the information out to the people who need it when they need it. And then OBI also has the capability to not only be in the web, but also mobile as well. So think of on your iPad or your Android or other form of tablet. And then just taking a look at Hyperion Planning. One of the biggest things planning does is it stores all of your plan information in a central location and makes it easy to input through user-friendly input and Excel templates. Not only does it store the information, it can also calculate and aggregate the information in a very quick manner. So it's very powerful, not only from storing the information, but also performing calculations, allocations, and then also has the ability to create reports as well.
So from this perspective is where we really saw a lot of value in creating the allocation form. So I think that's actually a little shot of our allocation form on the right-hand side. But that really simplified our entire process, not only from a financial perspective, but also from an IT perspective. So previously, we had to go into each of these allocations in Oracle. We had to point the calculation to a new budget. It required across each department to change that, that calculation. And now we have a simple form. There's no upload required. It's just sort of a user-friendly input form. We can enter our data. As soon as we hit save, it allocates based on the formula that we've put in there.
So that's a high-level overview of the tools themselves, but let's get into the specifics around the data integration layer as well as OBI and planning. So the focus for hierarchy management was really around flexibility. So not having to go back to IT to have them actually update the source system to incorporate a variety of levels of reporting hierarchies that wouldn't otherwise be needed in the transactional system. And the main point of this was really, again, focusing on keeping information in a central location. So by having this hierarchy management process within this data warehouse, it could be used across a variety of applications, and in fact is used in S-based planning and OBIEE. And what's very powerful about that is when an update is actually made to that hierarchy, it will flow through to all of those applications that are pulling from that information. And just getting a little more detailed into planning, we touched on the allocations, but really the focus here was on performing the allocations by departmental headcount and then running those calculations so it did that allocation without having to go through and actually update those forms or update those spreadsheets, what they were so used to doing in the past. Really, one of the big things here, though, in planning in general is eliminating those Excel spreadsheets. So many people have their own versions of the truth stored away on their own personal machines, and then they may make an update to it for themselves and then never actually circulate that with the rest of the organization, causing a disconnect between numbers from a reporting and plan perspective. So one of the biggest things for Infinity was getting that information in that central location so that they could all be consolidated and pulling from the same source. And one of the requests as well from Infinity was that when they entered information into planning, they wanted to see it essentially real time in their OBIEE summary level reports. And the way we were able to accomplish that was by using a transparent partition coming from the BSO planning application and feeding an aggregate storage reporting application, which is used in OBIEE. And the focus of having that reporting application is when they grow in the future and start adding in other applications such as workforce planning, they have the ability to consolidate that information in a single reporting application as opposed to having to model reports and dashboards off of separate applications. Now let's take a look at the reporting. So we touched on the guided navigation and really the experience for those end user groups. But the focus of the reports were on variance reporting, trend reporting, scenario reporting, so giving a lot of different looks and views for the finance team to actually do their analysis, as well as create those monthly reporting packages that they needed on a regular basis. And one of the other things we implemented here as well was what's called commentary capture. So if you think of, you have to actually explain a variance threshold on your reports, you have to add or create a comment for that. a lot of the times people are so used to just keeping those in offline Excel spreadsheets, and then again, this goes back to people have their own versions. Now, by having the comments in OBIEE using the write-back functionality, that's actually stored in that data warehouse, and again, everything is being stored and sourced from the central location.
This was a great enhancement for us. So as we're in a particular form, whether it be the consolidated G&L, we could look back 6 months and in a matter of seconds be able to look at the commentary that we put in for the variance and be able to understand if we're tracking towards that commentary or not. And also, even at the functional and department level, you may have commentary at the top level, but as you go down into that information, you're able to store commentary as the financial data gets more detailed at different types of levels.
So now that you guys have heard about the solution itself, let's talk about some of the business benefits. And really just call out attention to some of the biggest ones here. So really the roadmap, that was key to really creating the vision for the future and then prioritizing the various processes and technologies so that Infinity could implement them in a way that made the most sense. And really up front, the biggest thing was having access to that financial information without having to go through those manual pivot tables, the VLOOKUPs, sourcing information from the transactional system. So really that focus on automation up front, that way they can make everyone's lives easier in a pretty quick fashion and then also build out the architecture for the future. So what were some of the keys to success and lessons learned over the course of this program? So again, really focusing on the roadmap, because without having a vision, then you're only just focusing on the short term and implementing projects that will solve short-term needs, but then think of how the organization is going to grow. It doesn't actually accommodate those needs.
Yeah, and for us, our short-term needs were having a more flexible reporting solution. And we could have put that in very quickly, but when we took a step back and looked at the roadmap, we said in the future, we're going to want to be able to pull in all types of data into our reporting solution from lots of different sources, whether it be time, planning, or clinical, or HR, or headcount planning. And so once we decided that that's where we want to be in the next few years, we then went back to building the data warehouse, which was an important part of the architecture that had we not done the roadmap and only focused on the short-term needs, we would have built ourselves into a corner.
And another big thing here, too, was really the collaboration amongst finance, IT, as well as the rest of the business. So Jamie did a great job of actually having everyone work together, getting people involved, making their opinions heard, so that at the end of the day, everyone was comfortable with the solution that was being implemented, and you didn't have another department saying, why was my stuff not considered? So Jamie was really good at focusing on that idea of having everyone work together. Yeah,
so even between finance and accounting and what do we want to call different types of dimensions or hierarchies, even whether you're going to call something consultants or consulting, you wouldn't believe that people would have an opinion on that, but they actually do. So being able to sit down and work through each of those details at the finance and accounting level, but also reaching out to the business units early and working with them allowed us to have a lot of across the organization wins, because they were being heard and they knew that what we were working on, and as we were working through it, they were helping us to develop their own reports.
And just one last thing to note here is really the progressive thinking of the leadership here at Infinity. So people in IT and finance recognized that they were growing and recognized that their systems and processes were outdated, so they actually needed to work together in order to implement the solution for the long-term growth and expected growth of the organization.
Yeah, and I mean, this is just part of the evolution of being a smaller company and growing into a commercial organization. When we were small, we were light and nimble, and lots of people filled many hats. And as we're became a SOX compliant company, there was a lot of change management that we had to address. So, for example, if accounting needed a new account or department, in the past, they could just reach out to IT, and IT was able to turn that around very quickly. But now we needed to make sure that accounting, finance, and the entire organization were on the same page of what will exist in that department, what will we call that department, how will that department look for reporting purposes, and where that will fit in each one of the layers of the pyramid of reporting.
So let's take a look at the current steps that Infinity's gone through on their transformation journey. So we talked about their dependence on outdated technologies, things like Discover, FSGs, and just processes in Excel. And then they really transitioned into creating that roadmap. And again, this was the key to really unlocking the next steps in their journey and also the steps for the future. So then moving up, this is where we implemented the architecture. So thinking forward for the future, making it a scalable architecture so that we didn't put in processes that wouldn't work when they grew to a larger organization. And then really the biggest thing starting off with phases 1 and 2, standardizing the reporting and planning processes. So making things more automated, making things easier on end users, giving them more time so that they can actually focus on analysis of the numbers as opposed to having to spend so much time developing those reports and those plans.
Yeah, we went from more manual data migration from spreadsheets into our Oracle FSGs to adding value to the organization by being able to compare scenarios or different types of FIPS across the organization.
Now let's take a look at the next steps for Infinity and where they're going with their finance transformation. So Jamie touched on this focus on reporting governance, so making sure that everyone's in a line in the processes when something needs to be done from a maintenance perspective or a new hierarchy needs to be created, so there's no disconnect between IT and the rest of the business. Then moving on, finalizing their monthly reporting package, so that way it's all in OBIEE, and all they have to do is click a button and all of the reports will run for that specific month. Currently they're using a combination of OBI and SmartView to get the reports the way they want them, but now with the new hierarchy process in place, they can actually access those reports from OBI and have everything be integrated. And then we're going to revisit the FP&A roadmap. So this is an important thing to consider. A roadmap is for a very long period of time, so it's very important to revisit some of those priorities throughout the process. That way you're not focusing on something that may be irrelevant years later. So again, really revisiting this roadmap and then prioritizing the items on that roadmap.
Yeah, the way we like to think of this roadmap is more like a long-range plan for financial planning, where your current forecast may be for the year, and that may be the first year of your roadmap, but the years beyond that will evolve as the organization evolves. So what we have put into place for the roadmap today, we know we're going to address those in the next 8 to 12 months. But beyond that, as we evolve, as we become commercial, as we have different types of collaborations or working on different types of products, it's always important to get everyone, accounting, finance, and the rest of the company, back on the same room, update that roadmap, and make sure that your projects going beyond that are updated based on your needs.
And just once the roadmap is revisited, also focusing on bringing in additional data sources into this centralized data warehouse. So right now, a lot of the focus has been on finance and accounting, but bringing in other data sources such as trial information, headcount, workforce planning, all of this information so it can be stored in a central location and ultimately use OBIEE and planning as those reporting and planning applications with all of those data sources. So now you guys have heard a bit about where Infinity has come from on their journey and where they're looking to go, but we actually have an interactive poll within the GoToWebinar to see where you guys actually think you are among your transformation journey.
Thanks, Nico. Yeah, before we move on to the Q&A section, we did want to get a bit of interactivity in here. Always good to see where the audience is at on the transformation journey continuum. So if you see here on the left, a lot of organizations that we start talking to will openly admit that they know their reporting and planning processes are not optimal, but don't entirely understand where the root cause issues are and really want to start from scratch in terms of current state and mapping out where the road could lead. Other organizations, maybe a little bit further ahead, they understand the issues, understand the root causes, but really looking to define that path forward. several organizations working with that understand the opportunities, they have a clear transformation roadmap already worked out internally, but lack the implementation and really want to get more advice on, you know, how have other organizations approached it, and how would you go about implementing and executing on it. Whereas other organizations, you know, like in the case of Infinity, you've already embarked on your transformation roadmap, and maybe looking at, hey, how can we fine tune it? How can we tweak it? How can we take it to the next level? So we'll be launching a poll here. The results are going to be presented in aggregate, so all confidential. There will be no names displayed here. But let me go ahead and launch the poll. So you should see this on your screen now, where you can identify, you know, whether you're really at the start of your journey, already embarked on it, looking for information, or you're well underway in category D, if you will. Lots of people voting now. So while the vote is in progress, Jamie, quick question for you while we're waiting here. You know, as you embarked on your journey, what really helped you and the organization to get the initiative started? Because that's usually the biggest battle. It's just that recognition of, hey, there has to be a better way. You know, how do we get rallied around it? How did that work at Infinity?
Sure. Yeah, I think we always knew that the day would be coming that we would need to improve our reporting. So, for example, we put Discover on as a short-term solution, and we knew when we put Discover on that by, you know, using different pivot tables and things, that wouldn't be a scalable solution. So we did use it for 2 years, which I actually thought was longer than we would. And we shopped around for different types of solutions that would get us the reports in the way that we wanted. But really, it was the amount of time that finance and IT had to invest in actually creating the forecast and putting that into the general ledger, and the extreme lack of flexibility of our FSGs, that it was a pretty easy scenario for us to say, we definitely need to invest in a reporting infrastructure that will give us the more information in a quicker way. A lot of that has to do with us betting on becoming a commercial company. And so, you know, looking at the roadmap and saying, where do we need to be in 5 years, say, wow, we actually need to get working on that today in order to accomplish all the milestones in the future. And, you know, we're a biotech company, and we've always been operating on a limited amount of resources and people. So we didn't always have the ability to invest in this type of infrastructure. But recently we've partnered with AbbVie. They have certain reporting requirements for us as a partnership. So we've been able to, throughout our journey, take small bites out of our roadmap, but over the life of the last couple of years, we've been able to accomplish a lot.
Yep. No, it's a great overview. It's really that recognition of, hey, you know, with the limited resources that we have to become more efficient, especially looking down the road as you're commercializing the products. You know, you really have to be in that spot to be able to report on it, and then using the opportunities presented to move that forward. And certainly, you know, in terms of that phased approach, you know, even with organizations with you know, large budgets, large initiatives, even there we would still recommend that phased approach, because then you can really use that feedback loop to see how the roadmap is progressing, rather than trying to boiling the ocean right out of the gate. Well, with that, most of the audience has voted, and some interesting results here. So results are now displaying on your screen. And about 43% of the audience that voted indicated that they do realize where the challenges are, they realize where the struggles are, but really need to embark on that, you know, establishing the roadmap and the path forward. And then, you know, 57% of the audience indicated that they they feel like they're well on the way in terms of establishing the roadmap and moving ahead on their initiative. This is fairly consistent with lots of dialogues and discussions we've had with various clients. With that, we want to move to the next slide. So at Peloton, to assist organizations and really get over that hurdle of starting the initiative, we've developed the FBN Maturity Benchmark. So this is a benchmark that we've developed in collaboration with our clients, as well as the practices here at Peloton, to really establish a baseline of where an organization is at across people, process, technology, specifically pertaining to financial planning and analysis. This is a collaborative working session that shouldn't take any more than 90 minutes to have very facilitated targeted questions, have you map yourself against the continuum, and then we would come back for about an hour presentation around what the findings are and potential next steps are. A lot of our clients have found this extremely valuable to, without having to spend a ton of time, to at least get that baseline in place and get over that hurdle from, hey, we know we have to do something different, but where do we start? So if that's something that you're interested in, this is something we provide complimentary, and you can contact us at insights@pelotongroup.com if this is something that you would want to learn more about. With that, we are at the end of the presentation. I want to transition over to the Q&A session. Just as a reminder, the question and answer tool is on the right-hand side if you go to webinar panel. So any and all questions, please use the GoToWebinar panel to submit those questions, and we will walk through them as they come in. One question here coming in from the audience, and I'm going to point this one to Nico. Nico, can you expand a little bit on the benefits of leveraging OBIEE for some of the reporting capabilities, as opposed to like financial reports that could be another tool that can be leveraged?
Sure. I'd say the biggest thing here for Infinity was recognizing that they were going to bring in other data sources outside of S-Base and planning. So you think of financial reports being used just for Hyperion products, whereas Oracle Business Intelligence is more of an enterprise solution. So not just for reporting and dashboarding, but also actionable intelligence, report delivery, that type of thing. And when they do bring in those additional data sources in the future into the data warehouse, they can leverage the data warehouse as a source, S-Base as a source, planning as a source, and integrate this all into a single application. That way everyone is accessing the information from a single source.
And I'll give an example of what one of those reports might look like. And it could be, a financial variance report for a clinical trial, but on the same report we can find out who's submitting time internally to this trial, how many people are working on this trial, from what departments. In addition, we could source from a different data source and say, how many patients have been enrolled in this particular trial this month, or from even yet another additional source. It could be, what do we project for patients or sites that will get up? So lots of different information that's not just related to finance.
No, it's a great overview. Next question, Jamie, I'm going to direct this one to you. With initiatives like these where you have to pull in finance, accounting, IT, business users, it's critical to get everybody's input, but everybody also has their day jobs. What did you find to be the most useful tools or techniques to make sure that you were getting the input from the various stakeholders in the organization and ensure this was a successful project and initiative?
Yeah, and Ray, that's something that we are still dealing with, and still as we evolve, we're figuring out the best ways to do that. But what I have found has worked is once we did the roadmap and you had all of the key stakeholders in the same room, everyone understood what the short-term deadlines were or what the short-term milestones were. And then within the organization, we sort of had key stakeholders and not reaching out to every single person within a particular department. So for our clinical function or our development function, we may be working with one person. For finance or accounting, we may be working with one person. In the beginning, we may get a high-level understanding of what the goals and objectives were. Then one point person, for Infinity, it would be myself, we would work with Peloton to figure out what might that look like in terms of a high-level reporting requirement. And then as they talked about the breakaway sessions, being able to come back to the groups and say, hey, this is what, based on our conversation and based on what you said you needed, this is the path that we're going down to start developing the reports. Does this make sense? Would you like to change anything? And then we would go off on our own and sort of keep on developing the reports and then re-engage them as we develop the reports. So it was engaging early, engaging the right people, and then re-engaging once we've made some progress on the reports, but also doing that in a way that we're cognizant of people's time because they are doing different types of jobs throughout the day. And, you know, booking the meetings early. We have weekly meetings set up on the calendar, you know, for an hour that we could pull different people into the meetings based on what the requirements are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, managing that structure and calendar is critical. And, you know, to your point, starting small and then building out, keeping it interactive over time is extremely helpful.
Yeah, and Ray, I think it's, you know, it's important to know that while Peloton was working with us in terms of a partnership, we had a key project manager within Peloton, but we also had a key project manager within Infinity. And so each person on either side of the teams would be responsible for all of the groups. So our project manager would be reaching out to our IT department, our finance, our accounting departments. So we had one point person managing the relationship on both sides.
Yep. No, that makes that's absolutely the way to go. The next question here is a bit more technical in nature, and I think Jamie, both you and Nico can probably react to this one. But the question is, why did you target DRM for a future stage versus implementing it earlier on?
Sure. So the focus really was on master data management for the future because Infinity was so small at the time that they didn't really need that robust solution at the time, recognizing that they could scale it in the future when they could actually grow to those needs. And that's why we went with the hierarchy light version, if you will, of that hierarchy management process, because it really fit into those quick turnaround phases as opposed to a longer term implementation.
Yeah, as when you look at that roadmap, and we talked about we really had some short-term needs that to get some reports out there right away, but we wanted to establish that roadmap for the future. Based on those sessions, DRM came out, but we weren't able to implement both OBI, Hyperion Planning, and DRM at the same time and be able to have those short timelines. So as we have evolved in the last year or two, DRM has moved up the list in terms of priority and our roadmap, and likely will be something that we address within the next year.
Great, thank you. Well, with that, we're nearing the top of the hour here. Jamie, Nico, thank you so much for a great session here. For the audience, thank you very much for taking out the time out of your schedules. Really appreciate your participation. With that, we'd like to conclude the webinar. Thank you all, everyone, for participating, and have a great day.